Hey everyone, it's Desiree, and I am here with Says Stamp for our favorite month of the year. Well, one of them for 2020. So, as I said, let's the creations begin. So this is the stamp set that I'm going to be working with. This is called the Slimline Scene Builder, and it's for Christmas. I have to admit, when I first saw this, I was kind of stumped. Then it all just came in. So this is a 6x8 stamp set, and it has some wonderful Christmas sentiments along with a background scene and also two trees that can be decorated. So those dots will actually go on top of the trees. So my focus for this will be the backgrounds. So I grabbed a couple of my oxides. I grabbed my chipped sapphire and my faded jeans, and we're going to throw a little bit of the tumbled glass in, along with my Desiree K white pigment ink, and I have my stamp positioning tool. Now, the paper that I'm going to use for this one is my toned gray mixed media. Now, if you have seen my videos previously, this is my favorite paper for my colored pencils. But I just loved the background. A lot of times I say, let your pattern paper do the work for you. It's the same thing with your cardstock. Sometimes we can just add one color. And in this case, for this cardstock, we're just going to add the white pigment ink to see what that gives us for our background. So I'm going to make sure that that is positioned on this strip. And of course, we are going to make a slimline card. So as I'm putting my white pigment ink on this stamp, you can see it's solid and it has some open areas to resemble some snowflakes, maybe, or anything that you would want. But what I'm also doing as I'm putting that white pigment on the stamp, I'm making sure that it's variegated. I want it heavy towards the top and more on the sides. Now I'm going to use this same paper to add color to it. Now I started using my makeup brushes and then I said, okay, we can do this quicker. So I'm just taking the ink pads directly to the cardstock and just, as one person said, Laura Beard, I heard her say this the other night, we're going to swink. So I am just taking the pads directly onto the cardstock, and then I'm going to bring in my makeup brush, my blending brush, and I'm going to mix those colors around. I love the texture that I have with the ink going directly onto the cardstock. You can see the cardstock coming through just a little bit. You can also see that the tumbled glass covers more than all the other inks. I'm just saying. It looks smoother. Again, it's a lighter color. For the top portion, I am going to come in with some black soot. Sounds strange, but it just gives that darker effect onto this panel. Now for this panel, I'm going to do the same thing with my white pigment ink. I'm going to start heavy at the top and go thicker on the sides. So you can see I'm angling my ink pad onto the side. And then I'm using my finger just to smooth out any harsh lines that I may get. I'm crisscrossing it just to make it look variegated. This is also, when it goes over this panel, it's going to give that glow, that winter glow. That's what I'm going to call it, the winter glow. And you can see it is heavier along the sides and along the top, and it does get lighter as it comes down my piece. And that's exactly what I was looking for. Now, I know that there's dots on here that are left blank, so you would think this would be the reverse. No, this allows you to do so many more techniques, and you'll see. So there's also this smaller piece. So I'm using that and I'm doing the same thing. I'm stamping it solid with the white pigment, and then I'm going heavy along the top just to give that shading that we would add. I'm going to make lots of these because I do want to have dimension on this piece of the hills towards the bottom. Remember, this is a scene builder, so you can create any type of scene that you want. The beauty of our pigment inks, whether they're oxides or whether, excuse me, whether it's a regular pigment ink, it takes longer to dry. So what I'm using is my white embossing powder just along the top edge. For some of them, I'm covering it completely so that I have a solid piece of white. I'm then coming in with my scissors and I'm cutting these images out because they're going to be placed on the bottom of our piece. But I want to flip them because I want the difference in that hill. So I'm just going to real quick grab a pencil, draw that line, and then make those cuts as well. So now I can layer that hill against itself just to have that backdrop. I can use the stamp itself as my guide to line them up. I'm going to make 2 of these. So out of all of these pieces, I picked the best 2, got better with my cutting, and then I will be able to layer them using some double-sided foam squares and some other items just to give that difference. So here's the last one. So once I have all of these, I'm going to go through all of this wonderful mix and match and make the best 2 settings that I can find. So once I made that choice, I'm going to trim out that one edge, and then we just have one more, and you can see I'm just making that trim on the left-hand side just so that I can hide that underneath it to make sure that I'm going to have the that I'm looking for. And you can see it's going to sit right down on the bottom. I'm going to start with the smaller trees, and I just want to see where that placement will be when I stamp them based on the hills. So what I'm using here is I'm going to be using my clear embossing ink. First, I'm going to real quick hit this with my heat tool to make sure that it's all dry. Many times I forget to do this and everything's covered in the embossing powder that I choose. Yes, always hit it with your heat tool. Make sure it is dry. Always test it to make sure that none of the embossing powder will stick if you should add anything there. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to heat emboss these trees. Again, we're focusing on the different types of backgrounds that you can create. Letting your cardstock do the work, just adding your white pigment ink, and then of course adding either inks or your oxides, whatever you have in your stash to create a colored background. And again, it can be any color that you would be looking for. I'm going to come in with my white pigment ink just to put that on the edges to make them stand out, and I'm going to get these secured together so that they are going to be ready to go after we are all set. I am using my art glitter glue to get those set in place. And you can see I have the image of 2 hills rather than just one. I'm going to cut along these lines from the stamp because it should match with what I have already stamped on that panel. Now, you can leave the panel that size. I chose to use my paper trimmer and the metal wire guide to cut right along the white pigment edge from the stamp, just to make this a smaller size. Now, that actually measures, once you cut that down, that measures approximately, I'm going to say 2 5/8 by, yes, I'm actually measuring it now, by 7.5. Yes. That's the size of that panel once you cut them down. Now, mine could be a little bit longer because I am adding that dimension hillside on these. So keep that in mind. Once I have those trimmed, on the blue one, I just wanted to come in with a little bit more of that white on the edges towards the bottom. And I'm going to do the same thing with that other piece to get that set. Again, just cutting along the lines that are already stamped. Going to ink the edges up. No, not vintage photo this time. I know, it's surprising. For those of you that are probably new to the channel, I'm a fan of the vintage photo. It's one of my staples. If ever there was a staple, that would be it. So those are what the hills look like right now. And we're going to set those aside and we're going to start stamping. I wanted to recheck my piece because I know I just recently put that white pigment ink on the sides. I am hitting that with my heat tool. And the way that I'm moving, you can see that I am extremely impatient. And I'm just brushing away that excess that is still hanging on to that edge. And then just checking one last time. So with the hills placed there, that one little tiny mark will get covered by the tree. There is no reason to start over. We just keep going and see what we get. So using my clear ink, I'm going to prep my piece with my anti-static tool, and I'm going to stamp the first tree. I'm then going to prep the other side as I'm going to stamp one more tree off to the side. Wasn't quite sure if I was going to go to the left or to the right. For these trees, I'm going to use silver. I'm going to use my silver embossing powder. So every time I do a holiday card, it's really funny. I don't know if you all do this when you create, but especially if I'm making Christmas cards, and if I use silver and gold embossing powder, guess what song I start singing in my head? It's like a habit. And it makes me giggle the whole time that I'm doing this. Okay, back to the card. Sorry about that. Gabby moment there. So I'm stamping the larger tree onto the same cardstock that I have been using, that Strathmore mixed media. Now, the second one that I stamped, I have that spot there. So I'm going to try to line this stamp up and get that to match. I was pretty close. I was not perfect, but it's okay. It just looks a little thicker. That just means it's a little fuller. That's all. It's a full tree. I'm going to add that to my colored panel as well. And I'm going to get those that are on just the plain cardstock stamped as well also. I am okay that they're crossing as well, but I do want them at different heights. I don't want everything going across the same, at the same size, or the same height rather. I'm going to heat set all of these, and you can see that tree where I was off just slightly. It was right on, but I just was down a little bit too far. But again, that's okay. Tree is just full. It's going to be a full tree. Once these are heat set, I'm going to come in with the decoration for the tree. And that's going to be those dots. So those dots are great because it's kind of a wonky triangle, so you can angle it any way that you would want onto your trees. Now I am still going to prep these with my anti-static tool to make sure that it doesn't stick anywhere else. Once they're all stamped, I will move on to the larger tree and do the same thing. Here is where I'm going to use my gold embossing powder, just to give them that little bit of accent. So even though I have the plain background and this blue background, I'm doing the same stamping, the same technique when it comes to that. part. But you're going to get, even though you're doing the same thing, you are going to get two completely different looking cards just by simply changing your background. So once I have those, I'm going to add the gold embossing powder to my large trees, and then I will do the same thing. I will heat emboss this all at once as well. This will allow me to do the heat embossing quicker. My heat gun will be nice and hot to move right through these. And since I'm embossing on top of another color, the gold will be the prominent and will sit on top of all of the other heat embossing that I did. For these two large trees, I'm actually going to fussy cut them out using my Cutter Bee scissors, and I'm just going to cut around them. I'm going to leave a small border around the entire tree. These are very easy to cut. I just wiggle along the side just to give that image. So perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect fussy cutting because I am not a fussy cutter. I'm just saying. And this here, by the magic of it, are what the cards look like. So take a look at the backgrounds. Two very different backgrounds. For those areas that were open from the white pigment ink, I added gems. So for the blue, I added silver gems. And then for the toned gray, I added some clear iridescent. So I hope you enjoyed these two products. I hope you will make sure to stay tuned for all the entire month of September with Simon Says Stamp. It is an awesome time. It's fun. You see all these things coming out, and it's like we're all sitting at our computers waiting for the next launch of the stamp set that comes out for that day. I know my favorites, so I always make sure that I look out for those. But again, I do hope you enjoy. All the links that you could ever want will be down below in the video description. That includes the products that I used, and also the link to the entire Simon Says release for Stamptember. If you have any questions, please make sure you leave those down below as well, and I'll make sure I get back to you as soon as I can. Remember, happy shopping, and if you haven't yet, I'd love for you to subscribe, be part of my group here, make sure you ring that bell so that you know when the next video is ready for you to watch. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of your time just to watch this video. I really, truly do appreciate it. Everyone, continue to enjoy, continue to smile, but most of all, continue to stay safe and healthy. But remember what's also important for me, even if we just do it a little bit each day. Always be creative. Till next time, guys.